Hi, it's been a while. For those that are new here or just need a recap, Lumbermill is a factory builder and management game set in the forest that I'm developing solo in Unity. In my last video, I implemented these status indicators, which track buildings in the forest and give you information about whether they're working as they're supposed to. For example, broken machines show a spanner indicator. A problem with these though is that they don't seem to track camera movement very well, often lagging behind. The problem is that the indicators are updating their position after the camera updates its own position. So in order to force the camera to update first, I made the camera update at the start of each frame rather than the end, which fixed the problem. And that was all I added to the game for a long time. Honestly, I'd been finding solo development pretty difficult. Making every decision in isolation can be pretty taxing, and I felt like I needed a temporary change just to keep things fresh for myself. So I began work on a Mario Maker style golf game, where players could create courses and play those made by others. I got pretty far with it and it looks pretty nice, but it quickly ballooned into something unmanageable, and I found myself back in the position where I was making a lot of solo decisions, and this time with no feedback at all.
Writing music has been a massive part of my life for longer than games actually, and I drifted from game development for a while to dedicate some time to just writing and recording. The result of that, my EP, Cloud Plains, is finally out everywhere today, and I think some of you will like it. I've put a link in the description for anyone that would like to listen. I was in an absolute rut with games though, and alongside some pretty major health problems, I needed to escape everything for a while. Travel has always given me a chance to clear my head and just allowed me to take a step back and think about what I want to do.
So I packed up a single backpack and went to Thailand. It was an incredible experience and gave me a lot of space from the things that had been stressing me out over the last few years. Having that space from technology was really helpful, especially as my life had been surrounded by it for so long. After that, I went to Sri Lanka, saw some incredible sunsets and wild elephants, before eventually returning back to the UK. I was ready to get back to work, but Lumbermill wasn't calling to me like I'd hoped. I wanted to experiment more with the management game genre and decided to make something really small to try and innovate a little. Fire Workshop was my main project for a few months, and it's almost done, but you're gonna have to wait a little longer before it's ready to play. I've catalogued the whole thing though, and I've now found my way back onto Lumbermill, but this time with a few major changes. The isometric layout doesn't work for me. There are a lot of problems with layering the objects, and it makes the art creation process way too long, especially for a solo developer. Playing Let's Build a Zoo showed me that a good management game can be made top-down, so that's where Lumbermill is headed. I started with a sketch, just to mess around a little and see if I could find a style. I went for a 32 by 32 pixel grid, and spent quite a bit of time experimenting with the palette. I think everything looks a lot neater this way, and hopefully the time to implement it will save me time in the long run where I'm not solving isometric related problems anymore. But before I do anything else, I'm committing everything to GitHub so that if something goes wrong I can revert back. Next, I deleted the placer tool, a very old bit of code responsible for all the construction in the world. That slightly broke things, but nothing that can't be fixed with a new placer tool instead. So I created that script and an object for it to be attached to in the game scene. Now, thankfully, just 2 lines of code govern most of the positioning in the game. By changing these equations slightly, I can switch from isometric perspective to top-down, and most of the game's systems will handle it well. And while I probably shouldn't be surprised, I was, and it worked. Next, I decided to finally give in and use Unity tile maps for some of the layers in the forest. The ground and some other layers in the forest don't change much at all, and using the tile map system allows for some solid performance improvements. I created a tile for grass and added that to the template I used for setting up the island generator. That seemed to work, but the spacing was all wrong. Spaces were twice as wide as they were tall. It turned out I just hadn't updated the values properly in-game, reducing the tile width down to 32 from 64. So the spacing looks good and we're getting somewhere. Next, time to try out the new spruce tree design. There are 5 growth stages in total, so I exported the same design in a 5 tile wide sprite sheet and imported that into Unity for testing. I was pretty happy with how that looked, but obviously there's no size variation yet, which I'll get onto later in the video. For now though, I need a functioning build tool so I can actually start constructing things in the forest again. I made a little test design for how I'd like the UI to look, turned that into a single sprite, and after a bit of programming work, got that displaying in game, just highlighting the tiles which would be built on. I also added some settings to allow for the tool to snap smoothly between tiles, something that is a lot easier to do in the top-down perspective. So next I returned to the spruce trees, designing the 5 different growth stages ranging from a new sapling to an ancient tree. These provide varying numbers of logs, and in some cases the wood may also be of higher value, so it's important there are a range of sprites for each tree species. With those done, I exported them from Sprite, and this is how the sprite sheet looked. In-game, the new sprites looked like this. I'm pretty happy with it, but obviously there's a lot of overlap with some older sprites like the maple trees, which are just making things look a little bit messy at the moment. It still looked a bit too uniform for me, so I added some code to the trees to allow them to randomize their Y position up or down within a certain range. This just adds a bit more variation to the forest, and things are starting to look a lot more natural. I then returned to the build tool, just adding some polish to make things feel a bit more tactile. Indicators go red when they're hovering over an invalid position, and the tool will shake when you try to build. Finally, I created all the variations for the new conveyor belt design. These include all the possible corners and shapes in the belt system, but without the arrows, which I'll be adding separately in a future devlog. With the new build tool, you can click once to start a belt and again to create a continuous belt between those points. Obviously, there's a lot more that I can still add here, such as some kind of preview for the belts. With everything so far, I'm happy with how this rework is going, and I'm pretty confident it'll make development of the game a lot more straightforward in the long run.
Let me know if you have any ideas or suggestions, and make sure to give my new music a listen. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching.